everybody, welcome back to another audience podcast, Castos.com, a live stream to the Facebook group known as podcasthackers.com. Let's do some housekeeping before we introduce our lovely guest. I shouldn't even have him on the screen, but he's there. He's beautiful. He's warm. He's in Miami. I'm freezing in Boston. I just shoveled a foot of snow out of my driveway. It was not fun. Podcasthackers.com, 2,200 members of podcasters all around the world, maybe just like you watching today. Join that group. If you go to podcasthackers.com, that's the best place to find all the resources for the group. Not only can you find the group, you could download some resources, some material on setting up your first podcast, some great resources there. But also, the key thing, this is what I'm working on. It's part of why Craig hired me. Podcasthackers.com/add. ADD, podcasthackers.com/add. Add your podcast to the Podcast Hackers directory. I think we have about 40-ish podcasters in there right now. When we hit 100 podcasters in that directory, we get some fun stuff planned. So let's push that number to 100. And also a great place for those of you looking to find other guests or be guests on other shows. I don't know about you, Sebastian, but I always say, podcasters love talking to podcasters. It's a great resource to find other podcasters in our group, podcasthackers.com. Today's guest, Sebastian Rusk. He's wearing a shirt that says podcasts suck, and they do. To get him off the ground, Sebastian, welcome to the live stream.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Great to be here.
I might still have you muted because I no longer hear you. It's not muted in StreamYard, and we're having all sorts of fun technical issues today while Sebastian clicks around.
Can you hear me now?
Can't hear you anymore. If you can hear Sebastian, if you can, let us know in the comments. If you can hear him, just let me know. Sebastian does a lot with podcasting. He owns and runs Podcast Launch Lab. And it's a fantastic place for those of you looking to get started. He focuses a lot on marketing and entrepreneurs, getting them started, getting them off the ground. If that's you, definitely reach out to Sebastian. Maybe even host it at Castos.com. Sebastian, how's that audio?
You tell me.
Still can't hear you. It's amazing. I love technology. Let me just click on you, make sure you're not muted. What I'm going to do, he says he hears both. I don't hear anybody. So you roll, you keep going, you give us that introduction. Everyone's saying audio is good. I hear both. It's just all me today. It's just all me. Speakers say it's my headset. Lovely, lovely live stream. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to switch the audio to my laptop speakers and then lower the volume. All right. Check, check. Sebastian, how are you?
I'm great. Can you hear me?
Keep it going.
Can you hear me?
I can't hear him at all.
When podcasting goes...
everyone else can hear him but me. I'm going to remove him and then add him back into the stream.
How's that?
Check, check.
Check, check. Everyone
says audio is good. I can't hear him at all. It's amazing. Hey, you play, Sebastian. I'll watch your mouth. Give the folks listening and watching an introduction, who you are and what you do. Then give me a thumbs up when you're done, and then hopefully I can find the audio by then.
This is a very, very unique way of podcasting, I would say, going into 2021. Well, thanks for having me, Matt, even though you can't hear me right now as you try and figure out some audio technical glitches. And by the way, if audio and technical glitches can happen, they're going to happen during a live stream. They happen otherwise, but usually during a live stream. So no worries on that. Like Matt had mentioned, my name is Sebastian Rusk. I own a brand called the podcastlaunchlab.com. We're an agency down here in Miami, Florida, that helps marketers and entrepreneurs all around the world go from idea to iTunes in 90 days or less. So they have an idea, but they don't know what to do. So they hire us, and we take them from idea to iTunes in 90 days or less, and help them get their podcast launched. In addition to that, I am a podcaster myself. Got a podcast called Beyond the Story, where I tell other people's story and connect with other people. It is a big lead gen solution for the Podcast Launch Lab, being able to connect with people and get them on the show, build a rapport with them, and then do business in some form or fashion. But that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
So listen, before we hit record, I've got the audio back. I've said to heck with the Bluetooth headphones. I don't know.
That's probably the problem. Bluetooth.
Everything was working, and then when we went live, it was gone. Before we hit record, you mentioned something. You said, "Hey, I live outside of Boston." You said one of my best clients is outside of Boston, and they found me through the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Talk about the. I hate to say, a lot of people say, well, what's the ROI on a podcast? Like, how can I measure it? Sometimes it's difficult, right? Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it takes, a real strategic plan to find customers. This particular customer you mentioned said he found you through YouTube, which, you might be also repurposing podcast content on YouTube. Just talk about your experience with the ROI of a podcast or even just broadcasting in general.
Well, I think the ROI of podcasting is that the ability to continue to develop new relationships with people and forge new opportunities with people is endless. So if you sit there and go, well, I did it on my own and I started the podcast, I kept my costs minimal. Well, there's not a lot to recoup, but sometimes you can't, you can't get started because you don't know what to do. So you've got to hire somebody like myself that can help you get to the finish line and get that done. So there's an investment involved there. So you usually start it with going, okay, well, I've got an investment into this. What does it look like to at least recoup that investment, and then start to explore opportunities on how we can monetize the show. Now, the good part is that there's several different ways to be able to monetize a podcast. So when getting your ROI back, the first thing I always think is like Gary Vee's quote back in 2010 when someone says, what's the ROI of social media? And he said, what's the ROI of your mother? People look at him like he's got 10 heads. And like, First of all, shame on you for trying to put a monetary value on your mother. And second of all, you can't. You'll never be able to repay her for raising you and birthing you and putting up with you. I think social media continues to pay those dividends where you can put a specific ROI and say, hey, we dumped X amount of ad dollars into this. It returned this many sales of our product or our widget or whatever. But when we're talking about the long-term macro part of it, it is slow and steady. It's small chess moves every day, day in and day out, that eventually move that turn into bigger moves. And those bigger moves go from, well, I had somebody on my podcast to, well, we hit it off and continued our conversation. And from there, we're able to figure out a way to be able to do business together. Because if I have you on my podcast and then 3 months later, you end up hiring me, then I've monetized my podcast by having you on my podcast, right?
Yeah.
If I sell t-shirts that say podcasts suck if you don't have one on my podcast, I've monetized my podcast. If I sell copies of my book on my podcast, I've monetized my podcast. If I have you on the show and I talk about your product or service, and every time someone signs up with my affiliate link, I make money, I've monetized the podcast. So when we look at what the ROI of a podcast is you need to look at the macro aspect versus the micro. And meaning if you've invested something into starting a show and you've hired somebody to help you get to the finish line of starting your show, well, then you've got to recoup that cash. And of course you say, what's my ROI on that? But if you're starting with an iPhone and a pair of earbuds in your closet, which by the way, you can do, then your cost is going to be extremely minimal. In the podcasting world, well, there's a lot of negative feedback on platforms like Anchor and things like that. But listen to me, if you're just getting started, if you're listening to this right now and you already have a podcast, I'm not talking to you because you already started. But there are a lot of individuals out there, and including yourselves, where there's a lot of things that we want to do that we haven't done because getting started is just a little challenging at times because, well, life. And Anchor is a phenomenal way to allow someone to go from I'm not doing something to actually doing something. Now, again, polar opposite of like the Castos platform. It's like,
yeah, I thought I told you not to swear on this show, Sebastian.
I did. I did. That's a bad example, but you guys are set up to be able to provide a podcast hosting solution.
Yeah.
A side hustle entrepreneur isn't really looking for and to start paying for stuff. I'm using it like the psychology, but I totally get it. Yes, I do. No more 5-letter words on the no. Goodness. But anyway, recouping it could be macro. It could take you a year. It could take you 6 months. It could take you 3 years. Maybe you never monetize it. It's just a vehicle for you to develop new relationships that you then turn into business, which I still consider, ROI.
Yeah. What's the turning point? Or was there a turning point for you? Or is there a specific turning point that you impose onto customers or onto your own clients where you say, okay, maybe you do start free on Anchor and you say, all right, it's time to take this serious. You want to own your content. You don't want a Doritos commercial on your Anchor podcast one day that you didn't sponsor. You want to own it. You want to move to Castos. It's $190 for the year. So you jump in there. When do you turn the corner to say, okay, let's get rid of the lapel or the earbuds microphone. You buy a $100 microphone, you buy some $100 podcast hosting, and you get a little bit more serious. Do you have like a specific metric or a specific show count on when your customer says, okay, I see this kind of working here. I guess it's time to really invest. Or when somebody comes to you, do you just go right off the bat and you say, okay, look, we're going to get at least a halfway decent microphone. We're going to teach you how to record, and we're going to get some solid hosting.
When they come to me, they've got to fit in that box, because otherwise just go back home and figure out Anchor and go play around with that and get consistent with that. Or do it and realize you don't like it and then call me. So I never, ever set anybody up with Anchor. It's always, I used to set them up with a podcast host because I thought they didn't know where to go. And then I had a student want to change podcast hosts last minute right before the launch. And that's not a hard process, but you lose your analytics and at least now and all kinds of crazy stuff that goes on. So it's not so now I just give a few options and say, hey, pick one that you think is the best fit for you. So, but I do usually say that. And I say, start with at least a Blue Yeti and sign up for a podcasting account, even though it may be a free account. Upload a teaser or a trailer so you have a piece of content there where you can set up your distribution. And so that's usually the very beginning building blocks. So in fact, in the podcast, I wrote all about podcast equipment in a chapter in the book, and I call it crawl, walk, run. So, crawl is earbuds or a snowball. Crawl is a Focusrite box and a pod mic. Run is a Rodecaster Pro and a Shure SM7B or a pod mic. Yeah. So crawl, walk, run. But I believe you crawl first. I used this for years until somebody on a cruise ship convinced me that I needed to get a Focusrite Scarlett Studio, and that's when I actually got adult podcast equipment, I guess you should say. Yeah. And I opened the studio and I was like, wow, I mean, you can't be USB micing it up in the podcast studio. So we went Rodecaster with the pod mics, which I think is the best setup out there. That SMB mic is cute and everything, but you got to get that additional noise thingy, and there's all kinds of attachments and settings, and you got to know what the heck you're doing on this. This pod mic is, $99. You plug it in and you're ready to go.
Yeah, 100%. How do you balance the time that it takes? You said it, when we talked about or at least how do you frame it to customers when you say, hey, look, this could really work in 6 months, 6 episodes, 6 years. They might be looking at that going, geez, like, what's the time investment I have to put in there? The episode that went out today for our podcast is award-winning podcast producer Eric Johnson. He produced a bunch of shows for Vox, for Kara Swisher, for Recode Decode, and he's launching his own production company as well. And he says he usually starts with a pilot series, 4, 5, 6 episodes, depends on the person. Is that something that you implore with your customers, or do you look at it more like, no, we're going to do this for a year and really give it a go?
Well, our program is 4 months long and is designed for you to launch your podcast in 90 days or less. So we get that 30-day buffer there, and that's with your first 7 episodes. So nice. Including a teaser, an intro, and an outro. So the teasers, the goal of the teaser is to get the student behind the microphone and get their teeth cut and get them recording and getting a couple different versions and finally getting something that works, so that we can then take the intro and the outro, tie it onto the teaser, and have them send it out and put themselves on the hook to at least their community, or at least get into that habitual flow of, I recorded something, I had it edited, I uploaded it, and I am moving into podcast mode. So usually, and then we spend 90 days. So some people say, listen, I got the teaser done. I got episodes 1 and 2 done. I'm ready to launch. Let's launch with 2 episodes. Cool. You put a teaser up a couple weeks before the launch. You launch with 2 episodes. You never want to launch with less than 1 episode. I mean, less than 2. I mean, it's too anticlimactic. We're in this binge watch, binge listen world where we want everything yesterday just because, well, Netflix. Yeah. So,
how do you temper the expectations of somebody who comes to you and says, hey, Sebastian, I love it. I want to do this podcast thing, and I want to make it just like the Serial podcast or a Crime Town podcast? How do you temper the expectations of somebody who just hears a show that just seemingly feels like it was produced in somebody's, garage band, but it really took a team of 12 and $1 million per episode? Do you ever get that sort of level of expectation where they go, yeah, just some sound, right? We just make it. It should be easy. Do you ever get anybody going that far creatively that they think that that's what they need?
No, because they say first things first, before we sit down and start to get creative, we must make sure that we're not delusional. Okay, so we're sitting down to create something that is one of the will go down in history as one of the most historical podcast shows on the planet. Probably not realistic. If we start to utilize other shows, other branding, other content to jog ideas and figure out what that looks like. Hey, what if I use that format of someone emailing in a question or a topic and I read it on the air and solve it right there? So being able to borrow ideas, if you will, to be able to figure out how to formulate what it's going to look like for you, sure. But to be able to say, I want it to be like that, we're not going to do, and I just tell them we're not going to do that because that's not you. Your show is yours. Just like they say, there's a lot of podcasts out there. Isn't saturated? I go, well, not unless there's another version of you out there running around somewhere. And I go, why? What's people tell me? So I got somebody that does exactly what you do. I go, no, you don't. And they go, well, I guess I do it in podcasts. I go, no. Yeah. I'm Sebastian Rusk. There's only one of them that I know of. There may be one running around in Europe somewhere, but that I know of, there's only one. Yeah. And my community is mine. My content's mine. My voice is mine. My show's mine. And I think that brands, individuals, personal brands, businesses alike are going to continue to adapt that same mentality. My law firm is my law firm. These are our clients. This is our staff. This is our, it becomes like an intranet, if you will. And a lot of people are speaking of that. A lot of big brands are starting to do that, especially now when everybody's home. Start doing it like a internal podcast to be able to do like State of the Union for internal employees. But I forgot what the question was.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's it's great. I mean, a lot of people getting creative. It's a great segue into stuff that I've seen. Look, I've been podcasting for 8 years. I joined Castos back in August, roughly, and I thought I knew everything there was to know about podcasting. And then I came here and I saw like what brands and big organizations, big nonprofits, sports companies were doing with private podcasting and broadcasting audio to just their staff. And guess what? It got heightened because of COVID. And what we saw was like this massive rush to everyone teaching and using Zoom to teach their staff and have these meetings virtually. And then everyone gets sick of it within the short span of 90 days. And then we found people coming to us say, you know what? Our employees, they're sick of Zoom. They're sick of it. So now we want to just launch a podcast. And instead of meeting every Monday morning, we'll just ship a podcast and give them a week to listen to it because everything's crazy. Their kids are home. It's hard to get them their attention in that 1 hour now. So give them a week. Let them listen to a podcast. What do you see? Do you see the market shifting in this? And then I'm gonna asterisk that with there's a lot of folks who say, boy, this whole privatization of the RSS feed, Joe Rogan going to Spotify, a lot of original content only being able to be listened to on Spotify. We have to have Spotify now to listen to this content. Your thoughts on private content, RSS feeds, ownership? It's a big one, but just curious if you have any ideas on it.
I think the idea of deals like Rogan's deal, I mean, 100 million's a decent chunk of change, but number one, Rogan's going to go where the money's at. I mean, they're non-negotiable. Number one, as our most top podcasters. Number one. Number two, the brands like Spotify that have the pockets deep enough to say, hey, here's how cool we really are. And just as a quick reminder, as we continue to shove our stake in the ground and say, hey, we are the leaders in the space on here. What happens is that you bring a guy like Rogan over where he's still putting clips up on YouTube, but they're not episodes anymore, right? So for him to abandon 10 million subscribers on YouTube to go exclusively with Spotify was an extremely, aggressive move to make. But when you're weighing out 100 million exclusive show or keep it the way I am, I don't think at any of his numbers that he was bringing in, he's been killing it with the show and doing phenomenal with it. I don't think any of those numbers added up to $100 million. So he doesn't give a rip where the show is going to be broadcast, because what's the difference between Apple and Spotify now? Nothing, in my opinion. In fact, I don't even listen to podcasts anymore on Apple because I'm such a Spotify user. So what's happening is you're bringing a big name like Rogan over from everywhere else just on Spotify. And guess what? Mr. I dig or Mrs. I dig my heels in, and I only listen to music here. Guess what? Welcome to being a Spotify customer. And I think that strategic, that strategy is just so brilliant. They're not only are they bringing over existing listenership, but now they're gaining new customers, right? Because you're only going to listen to Spotify for about a week and deal with those ads, and then you're like, okay, here's my $10.
Yeah, I know.
Plus,
from the creators,
plus, Spotify is the first platform to be able to watch and listen at the same time. And Rogan's a podcast where you want to listen. If he's smoking blunts and drinking Bud Lights with Post Malone, you want to see that. Like, you just want to see the debauchery while they're recording the episode, right? So it plays really, and I think that it's really all starting to move there. But in my opinion, we can talk about this and debate this. I don't know what your thoughts are, but if I send you a link to a video that I did of a podcast episode, your brain says I have to watch it. If I send you a link to the podcast, you're like on the way to the gym, on the way home, at the shovel and snow, coming back in, whatever it might be. It's a lot less frictionless. So having this whole video podcast, and I get a request a lot too, because people say, well, I want a video podcast. I go, great. Why do you want a video podcast? Well, Joe Rogan has one. I'm like, great. How many followers do you have? And I'm like, well, I'm just getting started. So why do you, video, we can upload it to YouTube and do what? Well, I mean, Google, YouTube, Justin Bieber. You never know. Got it all wrong. YouTube is designed to execute a YouTube strategy, create content, be focused as a resource and an entertainment channel to serve your audience there. Sure, can a podcast be a video podcast? Absolutely. But the idea of a podcast is to be something that casts in my ear that I can listen to, like today's modern day radio show. So will that continue to evolve? Absolutely. I think for celebrities and people that it's easy to make a platform for. Sure, but if you're just getting started, forget about, listen, you have a video podcast because you have a webcam in front of you and you're recording via Zoom. Congratulations, you've got a video podcast, and make sure that you're set. I'm in a corner right here, 3x3. That's stick-on brick wall and foam squares from Amazon, and a ring light in front of me. I've got a 4K camera in front of me, but I've also got a Logitech webcam too that's still video podcast on here. So I think people need to stay focused on being able to create podcast content while a camera is running.
So the people that I've got a lot of thoughts around this, and so I see YouTube like becoming a YouTuber and becoming a podcaster sort of crashing together in this intersection of monetization where people go, oh, I want to be a YouTuber because look at how much money, look how much revenue all of these big YouTubers are making. The ones with,
that's not you right now getting started. It's your job to be able to create the brand and create the content and get consistent. Because a long time ago, those people were where you were at. They just started somewhere. These people aren't lucky. They've put in the work to be able to do it. Everybody wants the YouTube checks, but nobody wants to do the YouTube work. Every YouTube video is 4 hours. Minimum. Yeah. It really is. When you go from scripting to shooting to editing to posting to marketing, you got 4 hours in every single video. It's bananas. I went all in with YouTube in the middle of last year, just over a year. We just hit 1,600 subscribers. So, and it's not my favorite piece of content to create. It's just not. You think that it would be, but it's just not. But the payoff, like I said.
Why isn't it your favorite? Is it because of the front load of how much work it is to create the videos?
Yeah. Really. And there's listen, I don't care if I had a full staff in here to be able to, I guess technically I'd have to be involved with the process because I'm the one doing the actual video. So I couldn't walk in to an existing script, an existing camera crew and just go. I guess I could, but I want to come from an authentic space of, listen, I'm giving you what I know based on what you're searching for.
Yeah.
And not just that, you're coming for, people are on YouTube to be entertained and to be informed. A good channel will do both of them. And it's about pattern disruption. It's about scene selection, how you're talking to people, how you're communicating, what you're saying. And people fail to understand that. It's not to upload and, who knows? Upload it because it's YouTube. And I go, don't even bother. It's a complete, absolute, total waste of time. I ask for what? Well, you never know. You never know what. I know one thing. YouTube is not a post and pray.
Right. Yeah. I mean, listen, I mean, I've been doing YouTube in different capacities, again, for the same length of time that I've been a podcaster, and famously tell a story. I have my own YouTube channel, which is a side hustle. It's about WordPress plugins, youtube.com/plugintut. It's like 13,000 subscribers at this point. But at one point, 4 years ago when I launched it, I was uploading videos nearly every week, going through the pain that you were, like, man, I gotta tutorialize stuff for WordPress. It's not sexy. It's not glamorous. Like, I can't do B-roll on headphone reviews or microphone reviews like tech tubers can do. It's just recording a screen and just working to make people interested in software. And by quickly, I mean 6 months into it, got burned out. Maybe hit 1,000 subscribers at that point, but literally got burned out to the point where I don't even want to look at this anymore. I didn't even log into YouTube. I didn't care what was happening. And then one day, the AdSense check came in when you got your first like $100. And I was like, what happened?
Better get that camera out again.
Yeah. And I go, what happened? And I logged in, and I am not kidding you. I did not look at this thing for 9 months. And then I logged in, and it was at 3,000 subscribers without doing anything.
Right.
But that's because search, long tail keywords,
suggestions.
And all of that stuff. And then I was like, okay, maybe I'll try this thing again. And I
to be consistent, and that's what helps out. You start to see the results on a channel that you've done. I'm guilty of it. I haven't recorded a video. I think the last video I posted was like a month and a half ago.
Yeah. But
subscribers still continue to grow. I just got approved for the partner program, which takes quite some time to essentially monetizing your channel. So now I'm motivated. I just started writing scripts again. I'm like, all right, let's get a couple cranked out here. If I shoot 4, then I've got at least 4 in the hopper, ready to go, because there's definitely a return. I think there's a lot quicker of a return on YouTube than there is on a podcast.
With all of this ownership, sort of getting our tinfoil hats back on again, but with all this ownership of content, Spotify, absorbing and getting some highlights, I'm sure Apple's slowly, quickly, or not going to get into this game too. YouTube, the AdSense checks have been shrinking. Do you think in a few years time, like, creators being able to monetize and get a little slice of the action is just going to have evaporated from opportunity, and we have to monetize ourselves?
That's a great question. I just don't know.
Yeah.
Because maybe it's the next best thing.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe there's something in between monetizing on your own and monetized for your content. But this model works so brilliantly for brands. Yeah. I mean, who makes out on this? YouTube. Usually it's like, here's a couple pennies. Give me that content.
Literally.
Give me that content.
Yeah.
Here's 4 cents. Give me that thing. I don't think that's ever going to go away. I think it's just going to be amplified. Yeah. It's going to be amplified on other platforms too, where, I don't know what Facebook's going to start to do with creators, but they failed miserably thus far. So we just haven't done anything like creator. Oh, cool. We have a creator app. What does that do?
Yeah.
And pages and content, and here there's just nothing there. They're not doing anything to be, because they're like, we're an advertising company.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what move they make, or what platform shows up. TikTok is now becoming a larger platform for people to be able to monetize and be able to grow quickly on. I haven't gotten on the TikTok train because it just sounds, I know what a YouTube video takes. I can't imagine scripting these freaking TikTok videos out. And it'll be interesting. It'll be really, I don't think it's ever going to get to a point where we're not doing this anymore. It's not going to be like Facebook in 2009 where everything's just free and all your content just crushes. And then one day they just yank the rug out from under you and go, well, now only 10% of your page people will see your content. And then you can get the other 90% by running ads.
Yeah.
Gladly take your payment for that.
One last question about monetization, then we'll talk about the book. What do you turn to? And again, and I'm trying to reflect on all the conversations I have at Castos with people who start up channels here. And look, there are people, and it's hard not to turn people away from stuff that they're chasing. And there are people like, I want to grow a podcast, I want to get huge, I want to sell ads, and that's what I want to do. And, I look at that and I say, long road ahead of us, but I'm not going to discourage you from doing it. It's just a long road ahead of us. Where do you turn to, or what do you turn to monetize, or to inform somebody, say, here's how you should monetize. Maybe it should be an ebook. Maybe it should be a service. Maybe it should be a course. Like, is there something in your tool set that you give your own customers to say, this is a great way to monetize a podcast, at least in the early days?
Yeah. Yeah. And I wrote a whole chapter about that in the book about, the different ways of monetizing a podcast. The best part about it is you make up all the rules. So if somebody pays you $50 to mention them twice a month on your show, that was $50 more than you were actually making on your show. If you're selling books on your podcast, if you're selling t-shirts, coffee cups, if you're getting strategic partners on your show and you're interviewing them and talking about their product or service and dropping your affiliate link, that's a way of monetizing the show. The traditional model does work of, can we pay on a CPM basis or a CPC basis or a per download, whatever the case may be? That model works, but you must prove every single month how cool you are. And how cool you are, meaning how many people are downloading it? What are your demographics? Are they fitting the market for the people that are advertising? Otherwise, those sponsors, it's better off to, the quicker you can get sponsors for the show, the better. If those sponsors are your own company and your own products or services, fantastic.
Yeah.
The credibility factor of getting in there and actually doing something and getting a proof of concept that says, hey, listen, we did this biz dev deal where we gave you free sponsor spots with a specific coded URL, and we sold a couple deals.
Yeah.
That CPA model works on here. So it's just a matter of what you decide you can do on the show. When you're first getting started, the best way to monetize your podcast is to strategically, I promise I speak for a living, strategically identify people that you want to do business with and find out what their biggest need is pertaining to what you do and get them on your show to tell their story and interview them and build rapport with them. People are more inclined to give you a call about sales after you've interviewed them and stroked their ego than they are right out of the gate when you're just emailing or, sending erroneous DMs on LinkedIn when you've never even spoken to someone.
Yeah. I mean, I love the fact that you said it's, you make the rules, because even in a real niche podcast or a niche genre or category, I don't know, fly fishing, I don't know why that comes to mind, but
underwater basket weaving. Yeah.
Yeah. Underwater basket weaving. Again, my other podcast, WordPress, as large as that software is, there's very few people who really care about the underpinnings of it. And I can charge a little bit more of a premium for my sponsorship spots because there's not many people making content like that. And it's a great audience and engaged audience to advertise in. So local podcasts, I do a local podcast as well. Sure, there's a ceiling, I guess, depending on where you live of, however X many the population is who actually listen to podcasts. But if there's not a lot of people in that space, why not charge $25 an ad read and just see what happens, right? You can make $50 an episode times 4, $200 a month. I mean, I got 3 kids. That's a lot of diapers to buy. I'll make $200.
Sure, exactly. I mean, I say anything you're getting for the show monetarily is better than a poke in the eye with a hot stick. And,
yes,
especially when you're getting started too. So, and just what I try to do is I try to divert the focus off of I want to start the show to make money. Yeah. That's the wrong reason to start a podcast. You're starting a podcast because you have a strong why and you know exactly why you want to serve people through the content that you're creating on your podcast, in addition to building relationships with people. And there is not a better way to start initiating a relationship with someone than to interview them. So, hey, I know that guy.
Yeah, podcasts suck if you don't have one. Step-by-step guide to launching your podcast. Why this book? Why now? And where can folks get it?
So the book started off about 18 months ago as one of these little mini books, like a little pocket book and a little glorified pamphlet, if you will. And I kept coming back, and it was just the 9 steps of my course. And I kept coming back to, you know what, there's probably more there. There's probably more there. And I connected with an outfit earlier this year that I was familiar with that I'd wanted to connect with called Self-Publishing School. And a guy by the name of Chandler Bolt is the founder of the company. And they just got a phenomenal thing going on over there. Much like the Podcast Launch Lab, they help people go from blank page to published author in 90 days or less with their coaching program. And they instruct you and give you all the resources you need in order to get it done. So they approached me about advertising on my podcast. Oddly enough, they're doing more podcast advertising to identify new prospects for their sales team. And I said, hey, listen, I got no problem making you guys a sponsor for the show, but we're here as far as what our relationship could do. So why don't I go through your program you guys sponsor my show. I'll MC your live event that you're having in September. And by then I'll write my book with you guys. And then I'm a walking billboard for the program by default. So that's exactly what happened. So I went through the self-publishing school.com program and got the book done. It's supposed to be 90 days. I started May 15th. I just got the first copies it launched on December the 6th. Nice. So it took me right under, I don't know, I think it was 6 months, right under 6 months to be able to get it done. But the community that's there is awesome. And I had a coach. I worked one-on-one. So I was able to finally get the book done because I was on the hook because of a deal.
Yeah.
So otherwise it would have been shoulda, coulda, woulda. I mean, I've locked myself in a hotel room in Cocoa Beach numerous times over the past few months. Anything to like get.
I feel so bad for you, Sebastian.
Yeah, my ADD crazy brain to just write. And it's not, I'm not a sit down and I don't know what the heck we did before internet. I guess we literally wrote a book. I can't fathom writing 38,000 words or even typing them for that matter, because I used a great hack on Google Documents, which was voice to text, which is a whole nother editing nightmare in and of itself. But I got the book done. But that's how it started. The reason it all started 18 months ago, because I wanted to share my course. And then I kept coming back to myself going, I can do better than that. I can do better than that. And then procrastination, sets in, and analysis paralysis and shoulda, coulda, woulda. And the book's still not done. So let's put a deal together where the book's going to get done based on the parameters of the deal. And that's exactly what happened. So I poured every single thing that I know into this book. Talks a lot about mindset, talks a lot about procrastination, talks about a lot about who you need to be as a human being and identifying your why you're even starting this podcast. And of course, we walk through all of the 13 steps that we do here at the Podcast Launch Lab to take you from idea to iTunes in 90 days or less to get your podcast launched. Talk about podcast marketing, podcast equipment, where we're going, where we're headed with all this, my general overview and opinion of it. And just another a little motivation action, giving people permission to actually start a podcast, letting them know they actually can do it. I know a lot of, especially this audience watching, like, yeah, duh, of course I can. Not a lot of people think that way. They want to do it. They just don't know that they can. They need that extra, kick in the pants to really help them, of encouragement, if you will. Yeah. It's a hug with a slap in the back of the head to be able to let them know that, you can totally do that. And if you start now, this time next year, you'll be so glad that you started the podcast. So glad on here. So, but the goal of the book is to have people read this and go, you know what? I didn't think I could do it, but I can. I'm out of my own way now. I recorded my first episode. Sebastian, I didn't think I would ever have a podcast. Read the book. I started a podcast. So that's where I find my joy and real fulfillment of this whole thing. And then along with this comes, you get to speak to groups and talk and, trainings and all that fun stuff that comes along with writing books. But the real reason is to see people go, I don't care if you ever hire me, we end up talking about starting your podcast. If I hear about your podcast being launched, that's really where my fulfillment comes in.
His name's Sebastian Rusk. There's a lot of folks in the chat that said that they bought the book. They're ready to read it.
Thank you. By the way, I saw some of those comments coming. I appreciate you guys. You've picked up the book and read it. I really, really appreciate it. I'll love you a little bit more if you leave a review, a positive one, of course.
Leave that review on where? On Amazon, right?
On Amazon, please. Yes. Available paperback, or you can still pick it up on Kindle for $1. If you have Kindle Unlimited, it's free, which is a great price. 99
cents. Sebastian, where can folks find you to say thanks?
You can find me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's a great place to find me hanging out these days. I believe it's one of the most powerful social media platforms out there right now. So just search for me by name, Sebastian Rusk. You can find me on Instagram too, at Podcast Launch Guy. And of course on Facebook. And now 10 years ago, if you said you were following me, I'd call the police. This day I'm offended if you don't.
I'm going to have you back to talk about LinkedIn because, geez, I can't do it. Don't know what to do.
A great LinkedIn podcasting story. I launched a LinkedIn Influencers podcast a few months back, and LinkedIn has just been bananas ever since. So I'd love to talk about that.
That's awesome. Everybody else, thanks for watching the show. Podcasthackers.com, podcasthackers.com/ad. Add your podcast to that directory. We'd love to have you. Castos.com/audience. Podcasts suck book. Get it. Sebastian Rusk, an amazing guest. Thanks for joining the live stream. See you in the next one.